In this video, we're going to learn about structs, which is short for structure. And basically, structures are going to allow us to do a few really cool things in C++. And I guess, without further ado, we'll get on with the show. So, one thing I want to show you guys, I want to make clear is that, so we've learned about data types like an int and a float and a double and a string, and they all let us contain a type of something. An int is a integer, a float is a decimal number, and so is a double, as well as a string lets you contain, a word. And a word is defined as several characters together, or more than one character. But what if I needed, for instance, if I needed something that contained an integer, a float, and a string? Well, that may not kind of make sense right now, but let's say I want to make something in computers in the computational world that represents a person. Let's say I am a school and I need to keep track of every single person at my school. And for keeping track of this person, I need to know their student ID number, I need to know their age, I need to know what year they are, and that's all for now. We'll just keep it at that. But let's just say that's my example. So I need to know all those things. So I need to somehow define a way, keep track of all those things for one person and then have multiple persons. And one way, and how I do that simply, is I would define a struct. Struct is a keyword in C++ that is short for structure. And so what you do here is simply, we start by defining a structure by typing struct, the keyword, and then we can type in anything, and then we type in what we want to call the struct. I want to call it person. I guess, I'll call it student instead. You don't need to make the S capital, but I just do it. For instance, and if you noticed, I put a bracket, a curly bracket, and then I put a closing curly bracket, but notice the semicolon right there, the semicolon afterwards. That is mandatory. Please remember to do that. It is very necessary that you have that semicolon, or else it will not work. Semicolon, okay? And then inside this struct is I'm going to define the data types that my student has. So I said it has an age, which is an integer, and then I said it is an ID number. So I'll just call it ID num, and we'll make that into, and we'll say what year they are. And for year, we'll define it as a char, and we'll call it year. And the way I'm thinking of year is working as F. A char of F will be freshman, sophomore, junior, and then I guess senior would be S2. Whatever. If you're a senior, you're X, just because I said so. Because a char can only have one character, okay? So I've defined all of these data types for my student here. So now I'm going to go down to my main method. And notice I made this declaration outside of my main method. And you also can put in your header file, which I'll do at the end of this tutorial. But what I want to do now is I want to show you an example of making a student structure. So I'm going to declare student, and now let's see, I'm going to give the student a name, and I'll call it AJ, because that's my name. And then I'm going to put a semicolon. And then I'm going to do AJ dot, and then, okay, so let me go back again. So I've just declared a student structure, just like I declared another data type. The type is student, which comes at the beginning, and then AJ is the name, just like I can name a variable anything just not doing some crazy symbols or anything. So I do that. And so now I've declared a variable, and just like anything else, I can give the variable properties. And my variable has 3 properties, so it is an age, so I'll give it my age. I am 900 years old. I'm best friends with Dumbledore. And I'm going to give it an ID number. Not my real ID number. But I know most of the ID numbers start with, 905, 22043, something like that. Okay? And then I'll give it AJ.year, and then I will say I'm an X, because I'm a senior. Yay! And so I'll build it, and hopefully I don't get any build problems. And actually, just to show you guys, I'm going to print out AJ.age. I'm going to run the program. So I've set all these properties. I always forget to save it. So I've set all these properties, and then I printed out AJ.age, and the age is 100. And the way you reference these properties, I should go more in depth through, is the dot operator. The dot between the AJ dot age, AJ dot ID num. And that allows me to reference these variables that are inside this structure. It allows me to look at them and say, hey, I want to define them or now make them. So that's pretty cool, right? So that's pretty cool, and that allows me to do some, pretty awesome stuff. And I could print out the ID num and the year as well. But let me go on to another further application. So with this, this is pretty cool. So I could make another student here called Bob, and I could assign Bob to different properties. I could give Bob a different ID num, I could give Bob a different year, and I could give him a different age, which is pretty nice. So you can see I could create a million of these things. Something I could do if I was really thinking is I could make a student array. I could call it students and make it 1,000 or 100. And I could put, students and then 0 and then make that one equal AJ. So I could have an array of students, which would be pretty cool. So then I could actually I could call this, university students, so then I could put them all, and then I could put Bob in the other one, and that would be awesome. But what if, let's say, what I wanted to do is I wanted to make a function that uses students. Remember I said in functions, you can pass in any type of anything that you know, which is what we're about to do here. So student is a type. It's a type that you just created. You just created your first type. We created a structure called student, which we can use in other things that we use. So for instance, right now, we're going to make a method that takes in students, that prints out the students. So what we're going to do here is notice I still have a test1.h file. If you don't have a test1.h file, make one now. And what I want to do here is I'm going to make a void function that does all the printing out for me, that takes in a parameter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a function called print student, and what it's going to do, it's going to print out all the properties of a student. So I'm going to do student, and then I'm going to do the and symbol, and then I'm going to do person. I'll give it just the name of person, and note that this person is an alias for whatever's passed in. So I could pass in AJ, and that will just get alias to person. I notice some people sometimes make that mistake. So I'm going to print student, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to see out person dot age slash n person dot year slash n person dot, what did I not do, ID num. Did I forget to do something again? Oh, I have this extra thing. That looks pretty good. I did forget to do something, and what I forgot to do is I forgot to put my method declaration in my H file so it's above my main method, so I can call it fully. So I'm going to put it in my H file here. I'm going to paste in the method header with the semicolon at the end. Don't forget that. And it's giving me some stupid bug here, but I think this will go away once I run this. So what I'm going to do here is I have student AJ here, and you know what? I stupidly did not got rid of all that stuff. So I'm going to make him 900. He now gets a random ID number. Actually, I want to get rid of that. Just get rid of a few of them to make sure that I don't have overflow. And I called this year. And now I'm going to call print student. And I'm going to pass in AJ. And we're going to see if something actually happens when I run this program after building it. Okay guys, sorry, something I forgot to do is I forgot to put an extra arrow here, and something I also forgot to do is that, stupidly of me, I forgot that I need to tell this method that this struct exists. And so I'm going to copy and paste the struct I made earlier over here, because it is giving me an error, unknown name type student. So when I copy, when I build that again, it will go away. And so what I'm saying here is that when I include this test1.h, and I'm getting all these errors now. When I include this test1.h, what I'm doing is I am saying that I am going to load test1.h. And so when test1.h loads, or it copies all the contents over to this file and fills it in, then I'm going to load print student. But print student needs to know about a student structure. And it doesn't know about it yet because it hasn't been defined above any of this stuff. It hasn't been defined yet. It gets defined below, or until I moved it. So what I need to do is make sure that structure is above that method, so that method knows about this struct, so then I can completely use it, and hopefully this time everything will run fully. So when I printed everything out and ran everything, I got 900x and 904. 455. So that's pretty cool. So that's the simple way to use a structure. So I passed in a structure and I was able to do things with it. Now I want to note I used a reference here, and I actually do not need to use a reference type because I'm not changing anything. I just did that for kind of some funness. And what if the reference type, if I changed anything, it would change this structure up above too. Or if I made any changes, see, I just ran it again and I get the same output. Any changes made to this structure in this method that I pass it into will be permanent, or will stay with it even when it exits out the method. Another function I'm going to make, the final function I'm going to make, is that I'm going to make a constructor method. And what a constructor method is I'm going to pass in a structure, and then I'm going to pass in the name, age, and year, or the ID num, age, and year, and it's going to assign all those things for me instead of what I just did above there. So, and this is known as a constructor, and I'll talk about that a little bit as I go along. So what a constructor does is a constructor is known as a way to initialize either something we haven't learned about or you may know about called an object, or in our case a struct. So construct student, and what we're going to do is I'm going to take in a student, and this time it is going to be a reference because I am going to be changing it. It's going to be taking int age, int ID num, char year. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a person. I'm going to take the person object that should be blank, and then I'm going to assign the age, to whatever was passed in, the ID num to whatever was passed in, and then the year that was passed in. Note I'm using the dot operator still because that is perfectly okay. And it is also okay that sorry guys, I had a little bit of an error there that took me a little while to resolve. But so now I pass in my person object, my age, and my ID number, and what that does is it initializes everything for me in that format. So now all I have to do, instead of doing all of this, I also need to declare this in my H file so my code looks good. And I'll put it right here after the structure, remember the semicolon, and I'll switch back, and what I'll do is I'll call print student, but before I call print student, I will do construct student. And I'll pass in AJ, and I'll pass in the same things. I'll pass in 900 to the age, I'll pass in whatever, some crazy number for the ID number, and I'll pass in X to the year. So pretty cool. So now I'm going to run this again. Oops. And hopefully I get whatever output I get. So now I'm just going to run it like that. So as you can see, I got 900, I got X, and then I got whatever crazy number I just wrote down right here. So I was still able to declare everything, construct students, but I did it with a lot less code in my main method. So everything kind of looks clear in my main method, and I broke up the code so I can then use a constructor there. And so that's pretty awesome. I also want to note that let's say I wanted to do something crazy, like I wanted to increment the age +1 and then assign it to the constructor. So to make sure, so like I did right there, that's perfectly okay because I used a reference type. So I can, as you can see there, I have 901 because I incremented 1 before I assigned it. If I did this afterward, just a quick refresher, then nothing would happen. The age would still be 900. Just to show you guys. If you're unsure exactly why that's true, watch my operators video. It's pretty good. So there you guys go. As you can see, you can pass in structures, you can make structures, you can put anything you want in a structure, you can put other structures inside a struct. I could put an array. Let's say I have a certain number of books that I need, and I want to make a string of books, and let's say I have 50 books, even though you could just I'm just downloading them like that, and I also want to note that it is giving me error on string because doesn't know about string. And so now it recognizes what string is because it's defined in both of those libraries. Okay, so I hope everyone understands how you can use structs, you know what they do, and everything else about them. Remember that I use the dot parameter to reference data types within a structure. So if I want to, if I do student, I give it a name and I do the name dot age or whatever the data type I define here. Remember that when I'm making a structure that I'm giving an age, ID number, I'm declaring variables just like I usually do with semicolons at the end. And I don't need to give them any special values. And so that's pretty nice. And remember the semicolon, when I declare a struct, I have a curly bracket and a closing curly bracket with a semicolon at the end of that closing curly bracket. Very important to remember, or else it doesn't work. That's just the syntax that's required. So, and I have struct at the beginning, which is pretty nice. So yeah, those are also awesome things to do. Before and one other thing I'm going to mention right here is, well, I'm going to show you guys one more thing with functions. So let's say I'm making a function, and in this function I want to have a default argument. What do I mean by that? Let's say if I don't pass in a year to my constructor, then I want the year to be by default. I want you to be set to a freshman, which we defined as the character f. So there is a way to do this in function parameters. So let's say I don't pass in x right here. I only pass in 2 parameters, and I don't have an extra comma at the end. Well, if I go up to my method header, I can, in my h file, I can implicitly declare that year will be f, that the char year will be set to f, unless it's specified otherwise. So what do I mean by that? So I said the year I made that initialize to f, and let me build the program again. And so I initialized the char in this method, constructor student, to nothing. The age, the year, never gets initialized to anything, except it will defaultly get initialized to f based on me setting it here in this method, which is pretty nice. So just to demonstrate, I'll run this function. And so I got 900 f, that blank number. So I did set it to f while not doing anything at all. And that's because you're allowed to supply methods with default values to set things to in C++. So I can do this. Note how I have this equals f, character f, in my method header, but not my method declaration. You don't need it in your method declaration in your CPP file. You just need it where your method header is, so I can tell it. And note, I can also make int equal to 22 by default or something like that, but I can only do this for the last parameters. So for instance, age, unless I make them all default, I am saying, because if I make the parameters have a default parameter, I am also saying, hey, you're not needed, or it's possible that you cannot be needed. So note how I have 900. This huge ID number, and I don't even ask for a character, and it's not going to give me an error, I can still run my program because it will automatically give me an F. But I can also override that F and put X here, run the program, and everything is all good. I set it equal to X. It overrode that F. That F just happens if no parameter is given. It say, oh, hey, no parameter was given, so I can just default to F. So you can see where this can be pretty useful if you have a lot of parameters, and most of the time it's just the default value, so you just want to use those. But like I showed you, I can also do int here, but I want to note that you would only make the default parameters with this kind of equals thing at the end of your method declaration. So they would be the last parameters. Like this is the last parameter I declared, and you can have multiple default parameters, but you want them to all be shifted to the right as much as possible, the last parameters, because when I don't have a initial declaration, like for student age, I'm saying, hey, you are required to give me those values in our function. You are required to give me those values. And I don't want to have a case, it's not possible. I don't want to have a case where, for instance, age, it could be not required. Age could always be 20, could be default to 22, but ID num is required, because that would be very confusing. Okay, I want all my defaults to be at the end so I can possibly put in what's required and then leave nothing, because I want to put in what's required. I don't want to be doing some crazy stuff. So like if age it could be defaulted, I'd want to shift it over to the right. I'd want to move it to the right of ID num. So all my required parameters are to the left as possible. They're all to the left as possible. Nothing that is non-required, nothing that is defaulted is before that. So I'll go up on that tangent on function. I just went up on another tangent on functions. But yes, guys, I hope this helps you enjoy look at structures, how they're declared, and everything you need to know about them. So have a great day.